If you want a whack of whole food plant-based recipes, you came to the right place. That's Parmesan cheese right there. And it looks like chicken. Pretty great. You got really excited there. But it's packed with protein, so you can eat this more or less guilt-free. Cooking doesn't need to be pretty, it just needs to be tasty. Raw, plant-based cookie dough. All right, just take it. Just take it already. Have this thing. Super. Welcome to, or welcome back to PB with Jay. Hi, I'm Jeremy. I'm the J in the PB with Jay. Here on the channel, we focus on lots of plant-based goodness from my own recipes, which you're gonna see a video full of, from our series of cookbook reviews we do. I do a lot of live streams and a lot of other fun things. Oh my gosh. A lot of you subscribe to this channel from our most popular video, Vegan or Plant-Based for Beginners. And this is the third and sadly final part of that series. And it's a doozy. All of these recipes and clips are a compilation of a series I did for a small local access channel here in Canada, and I've been able to repurpose them and put them on the channel for you. We've got everything from spaghetti squash bolognese, the squash is the bowl, to your own naan and buttered chickpeas. That is unbelievably comforting and delicious. A whole food plant-based cherry pie. You guys don't want some of this, right? I'm just gonna eat the whole thing. And a whole lot more. From savory to sweet. These are pretty. We have got something for literally everyone, from kids to adults to that picky person in your family that doesn't like anything. There's something in here for them. But first, I'd love to give some shout outs to some of the people who've said hello to us in the comments down below. Jen from the smallest state in the United States, Rhode Island. That's what she wrote. I'm not a geography expert person thing. Gillian from Dallas, Texas. Or Jillian, so I went with the hard G sound. Let me know. Yvonne from Clearwater, Florida. Susan from Washington, PA. Lynn from Auckland, New Zealand. Sherry from London, Ontario, Canada. Becky from Stirling in Scotland. Michelle from Sioux Falls, South Dakota. Barb from Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. And John didn't actually say where he was from, but I know where he's from on the internet. He's from our Mighty Network. What is that, you ask? It's like PB with J 2.0. In there, you get access to our videos a couple days early, you get members only live stream, and most importantly, you get access to a members community full of like-minded people who don't yuck anyone's yum and share a lot of ideas and recipes and tips. And I'm in there quite a bit. And every now and then we have an exclusive giveaway that you can only get by being part of that group as well. If you want to join, you can do so at the link down below for the price of a crappy cup of coffee a month. Other ways to support our channel is giving one of those super things down below. It's like a little tip for the channel. And you know, we got merch as well at our merch store. All that stuff's in the description down below. But what you want is the recipes, so here we go. Chia puddings are nothing new, but a lot of the ones that people make require them to sit in the fridge for hours. This is one that you can eat right away, and it reminds me of that kind of pudding that I had that came out of a box as a kid.
Yeah, it's awesome.
It's so good. And it only requires a few simple ingredients, and it's whole food plant-based. So we start with 2 cups of...
dairy-free milk.
That's right. We're using...
oat milk.
Right. We're gonna put in 6 tablespoons of...
chia seeds.
Right. And what does that do for it?
That thickens it.
That's right. I'm gonna put in 1/4 cup of cocoa powder.
Makes it chocolatey.
8 dates.
8 dates.
If you're using medjool dates, you can probably get away with 4. If your dates aren't soft, these ones are, you should soak them first. But these ones are pretty good. Last but not least,
vanilla.
We get a teaspoon. Okay. And now we're gonna blend it up. Crank it up. How's your day going?
Good.
Let's bring it down. A lot of people have a problem with the texture of chia pudding because they don't like the little balls and seeds as they start to firm up and get thicker. But this omits that by just blending them and making it nice and creamy. So we definitely want this to sit for a few minutes, and why is that?
So the chia activates.
It activates and it thickens up a little bit, right? You can leave this on the counter, but what we'll do is we'll stick it in the fridge for a few minutes, and then we'll come back and taste it right after. What do we think? That thickened up nicely. Oh, you're just diving right in.
You need to see if it's good, actually.
How do we do?
I'd say pretty good.
I like that consistency. Oh. I caught it, don't worry. Mmm. I might let that sit a little bit longer in the fridge. I like it a little bit colder, but actually pudding warm is pretty good too. I really like this. It's not overly sweet the way a lot of puddings are. It's got a bit of a bitterness to it, right?
Yeah.
But it still has enough sweetness to carry it through.
It's barely bitter.
It's barely bitter. Not only that. And the chia, you couldn't even tell the chia's in there. Pudding. It's delicious. Did you get that reference?
Ish. No.
He's not from the 80s. Grocery stores are full of fake plant-based deli meats, but let me show you how to make one on your own that comes together quickly, freezes well, and saves you a ton of money. The magic ingredient you need for this is vital wheat gluten. This is what's gonna give it the right texture and binding agent. So we're gonna put 1.5 cups of vital wheat gluten into a food processor. We're gonna crumble in 1 package of firm tofu that's been drained. You can just break it up with your hands. It doesn't have to be pretty because the food processor is gonna do all of the work for you. Bloop! Just a giant mountain of crumbled tofu. So this is the base of what we're gonna do, and now it's just about flavoring it. So I'm making what I would call like a turkey deli meat flavor. So I'm gonna pop in a tablespoon of water, a tablespoon of miso paste, a teaspoon of apple cider vinegar, a teaspoon of liquid smoke, 3 tablespoons of nutritional yeast, and 2 teaspoons of onion powder, and then 1/2 teaspoon of salt, 1/4 teaspoon of sage, teaspoon of garlic powder, and 2 teaspoons of no salt seasoning. This thing is packed with flavor. I'm so excited. So now we're gonna get this lid on top of here, and we're just gonna let this thing fire up. You're gonna let it continue to mix until it forms a giant ball inside of there. So this formed a little differently than it normally does, but we're gonna make this work anyway. So all we're gonna do now is just form it by hand. So you just wanna get it into the shape of basically a log. You could also form this into sausages or any other shape you want, and you just kind of roll it into the right shape. And it doesn't have to be a perfect log because we're gonna wrap this in aluminum foil. Give it a loose roll because it's gonna expand a bit inside the aluminum foil. And then we're just gonna twist the ends. And then what we're gonna do is I'm gonna place this inside of my pressure cooker with a cup of water inside this trivet, and I'm gonna let it steam for 1 hour. So after it steams for an hour, you wanna just gently release the tin foil because the steam is gonna start to come up. So now we're gonna let this cool down before we slice it. It's gonna form a little bit of a skin around the edges as it cools, but that's what you want because that's similar to deli meat. It's even got some of the little speckles inside of it. I really love how this turns out. What's beautiful about this is that it lasts for at least a week or 2 inside the fridge, but it freezes beautifully. So you can make a really big loaf and it'll last you for a long time. But how does it taste? For me, this rivals any plant-based deli meat that I bought in a grocery store or even had in a restaurant. But it's even better when you put a little bit of really good mustard on top of it. Save yourself some money and make this yourself. It's so easy. This is great inside of a sandwich. We're big fans of dessert in our house, and if we haven't made something before, we like to throw something together on the fly. Now, the other night, you wanted a dessert, and Mommy said only if it was healthy, right? Mom? I should say Mom, because he's a teenager now.
Yeah.
So she said only if you had something healthy, so what did you do?
I looked up a mug cake recipe and then made it healthy.
So that's what we're gonna show you how to do
And
today.
plant-based.
And plant-based, right. It's still a bit treaty, though. They started with probably white flour, right?
Yeah.
So what we have here is a 1/4 cup of whole wheat with another 1/2 tablespoon, right?
Yeah.
And then inside of that, we're gonna add 1/2 teaspoon of
Baking powder.
You wanna do that in each one? And then a pinch of salt, right? What do they call for a sweetener?
Just white sugar.
White sugar, but we're gonna use?
Coconut.
Always do it towards the camera, right?
It's a bit awkward.
It's awkward to do it towards the camera, but Paul gets upset if I don't. So we're just gonna mix that together until all of the dry stuff is combined. And then it called for just regular milk, right?
Yeah.
So we're using
Oat milk.
Oat milk. 1/2 of one of these is just vanilla, so it's just like a 1/2 teaspoon of vanilla in each one. And then it called for butter, right?
Yeah.
What are we gonna use instead of butter?
Banana.
Ephraim already mashed it together. So we're just gonna try to divide it as best we can equally between both cups. And that's it. Now we're just gonna stir it around. Okay, so the trick here is just to make sure there's no dry bits at all. And then the trick to this when you bake it is just to try to scrape off all the stuff from the sides, because if you don't, it's just gonna kind of cake on, and it's just things that you won't be able to eat. It'll just end up inside the batter. For those at home, if you wanted to make this gluten-free, what could we use for the flour?
Gluten-free flour.
Or?
Oat flour.
Boom. And then just a handful of chocolate chips each. These are non-dairy. You could switch out the chocolate chips and use dried fruit if you wanted to, or you could add some nuts to this as well if you want to make it more like a banana bread.
Yeah.
What's another thing? If people don't like bananas, what could you put in here instead of bananas?
You could put in applesauce.
Yeah.
Or margarine.
What's the trick to cooking this?
Put it in the microwave for a minute and...
Little treat.
For a minute and 45 seconds, and then...
Leave it inside, right?
Yeah, leave it inside for another minute.
Don't take it out right away. You gotta wait one more minute. But we're gonna do these one at a time, right?
Yeah.
All right, so let's put these in the microwave and we will be right back to show you what it look like. So as you can see, these turned out pretty awesome. A warning at home, make sure, oh, you just dove right in.
Yeah.
You didn't wait at all, I had a whole speech planned. Oh, it's so gooey. I'm gonna burn my mouth a little bit, but I don't care.
Yeah.
That is really good. Like for a borderline healthier dessert, this is pretty great. You got really excited there.
It's hot.
It is hot? Yeah, watch out for the bottom. So maybe give it a few minutes to cool down. But we made this in less than 5 minutes, all told. And then maybe give it another 5 minutes to cool down and you're good to go. This also goes amazing with some plant-based ice cream, but it's pretty awesome on its own. And
the banana also gives it a good flavor.
Yeah.
It's like banana bread.
It's hot and delightful. Good work. All right, just take it. Just take it already. Have this thing. Keep it. Just jumping in here after, a recipe or two, just to let you know that if you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, you should do so because you can get more awesome videos like this. All right, back to the next recipe. So this one takes a little bit of time, but it's worth it. We're gonna make some naan. If you've never heard of naan, it's the flatbread that you get at Indian restaurants, and it's delicious. You can use this for curries or stews, or you can actually just cook a pizza on it if you want as well. First, we wanna get our yeast going. If you've got some in the fridge, you wanna make sure that it's active and hasn't died. So you wanna start with 3/4 cup of warm water. It should be the kind of temperature that you have when your tea is ready to drink. If it's too hot, it'll kill the yeast, and if it's not warm enough, it won't activate it. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna mix in just a little bit of sugar, because that's gonna help feed the yeast. Here, I'm just using a teaspoon of maple syrup, and we're just gonna make sure that's nicely mixed together. And then we're gonna pour a teaspoon of active yeast on top, and we're gonna let this sit for about 10 minutes. It takes about that long for it to get nice and foamy. And if it doesn't get foamy, your yeast is dead. Throw it out and buy some more. Also, you won't be making naan today, probably. So while that yeast is rising, we're just gonna mix together our dry ingredients. So I've got 2 cups of whole wheat flour here, and I'm just gonna mix in a teaspoon of sea salt and 3/4 teaspoon of baking powder. And then we're just gonna sift that together quickly until it's nicely incorporated. So as you can see, that yeast is active. It has risen perfectly and it's just floating on top, which lets you know that it is good to go. So what we're gonna do here is often with naan, you want some more moisture. So you would add some butter or some kind of a fat. So what I'm using here is a plant-based coconut yogurt, and that'll add a little extra flavor to it too. So I'm gonna mix that right into our yeast mixture. This is 5 tablespoons of plant-based yogurt, and then we're gonna pour this into our dry ingredients. Just mix this around until you don't see any flour clinging to the bottom. It's a wet dough. That's okay. That's what you're looking for. It's gonna be a bit of a shaggy mess, but that is okay. So just get all of the dough off the sides. Oh yeah. So now we just want to lightly flour a surface. I'm just gonna use some whole wheat flour. It's okay if this absorbs into the dough a bit, because like I said, it's pretty wet already. Onto there. We're gonna give this a really light kneading. We're just gonna do basically 5 turns around each way. So that's 1/4. That's 1 turn. So we're gonna do that 5 times where you just do a 1/4 spin, push it down. Goopy hands. This is getting pretty good. It's a shaggy mess of a ball. That's okay, but at least it's forming some kind of a ball shape. So what we're gonna do now is we're gonna pop that back into our bowl. We're gonna put a lid on this, and we're gonna leave it somewhere dark and warm for 2 to 4 hours until it's at least doubled in size. So this has been sitting for about 4 hours, and you can see it is doubled, if not more. We're gonna put a little bit of flour onto our bench. And then we're gonna scoop this out. It's still a pretty wet dough, but that's okay. I'm gonna put some more flour on top, and what we're gonna do is we're gonna do a really quick kneading of this, just for 30 seconds. Just to kind of give it some love. Add a little more flour as needed. Great. We're gonna shape it into a bit of a ball. Or actually, we're gonna shape it into a bit of an oval. Is we're gonna cut this into 6 different pieces to make 6 naan. And then what we're gonna do is we're gonna knead those into really little balls. Yeah, those are rough little balls. Great. So we're just gonna cover these with a towel and leave them for 15 minutes. So these have been resting for 15 minutes. So what we're gonna do now is just lightly roll them out with a little bit of flour on the bottom. We're looking for an oval shape here. You can roll these pretty thin. So I have 2 pans that are really nice and warm on the stove. So what I'm gonna do now is I'm gonna do 2 at a time. They really only take a minute or 2 to cook on each side. You just wanna keep cooking them until they start to bubble up and then flip them over. Oh yeah. They're poofing and delightful. This is exactly what I want. Look at the volume we're getting out of those. So the trick is to put these really quickly onto a plate with some kind of a tea towel, because we want to keep that heat and moisture in to keep them nice and soft while the other ones bake. Keep on going and repeat the process until you run out of bread. Look at this delicious bready goodness. I love it when it gets a little burnt stuff on it, because then it looks like the stuff that I get at an Indian restaurant. This is amazing, served with your favorite Indian dishes, but it's also just great on its own. If you want to make it a little more decadent, brush this with a little bit of plant-based butter or margarine. Fun fact, if you can't find plant-based margarine in the grocery store, it's because all margarine is plant-based. It's made with soybean oil. However you want to eat this, it's delicious. And the yogurt in this makes it really pillowy and soft. One of my favorite Indian dishes before going plant-based was butter chicken. And it took me a long time to get to the point where I could match the fat, flavor, and satisfaction of that dish. So here I present to you buttered chickpeas. The added benefit to this is this dish comes together super fast. We're gonna heat up a pot, saute some onion, and about 2 to 3 cloves of garlic, depending how big they are. Or more garlic if you're a big lover of garlic. And we're just gonna sweat those for maybe 2 to 3 minutes until they're nice and translucent. I try to not use much oil for cooking, so I just like to let these water saute a little bit. And it's okay if you get a couple little brown bits onto the onion, because that's flavor. It's caramelizing. You want that. Nothing's worse than a boring, soggy onion. That is smelling awesome. So now that we got those onions nice and translucent and starting to sweat, we're gonna add our flavor. And this is where the magic starts to happen in this dish. Our spices. We're gonna add 2.5 tablespoons of cumin powder, 2 teaspoons of cumin, and 1/2 teaspoon of paprika. The trick to this is making sure you coat the onions and the garlic, and that's what's gonna give that pungent flavor. Now we're gonna add a 28-ounce can's worth of crushed tomatoes. You could probably use tomato sauce in a pinch, and if you don't have crushed tomatoes, but you have a can of diced tomatoes, you can just puree that. Now we're also gonna add 3/4 cup of coconut milk. Next, we're gonna add 1/4 cup of almond butter. This was the missing ingredient all those years. Once I started putting this in, the flavor just came together and I was starting to taste that flavor that I missed all those years in buttered chicken. We're gonna stir that around till that's nice and mixed. Oh, that's doing beautiful, beautiful things. And now we're gonna add in about 2 cups cooked of chickpeas. Ooh. Jeremy's getting happy. So now as we start to build these flavors, I'm turning that heat back up a little bit. And we're gonna add in a tablespoon of tamari sauce. You could also use soy sauce, a tablespoon of apple cider vinegar, and a tablespoon of maple syrup. Just adds a little nice sweetness to it. And we're gonna give it a good stir. So we're gonna stir this and let it simmer for about 10 minutes so those flavors can really start to come together. If you haven't started yet, make some rice. So this is coming along nicely. You can hear that bubbling and it's letting us know that it's really happy. You can let this keep going until it's the thickness you like. Some people like their buttered chicken or chickpeas a little bit runnier. Some people like them thicker. I like mine a little on the thicker side, so I'm gonna let these continue to cook. What I'm gonna do now, while that's going, is I'm gonna add a couple handfuls of spinach. If you don't have spinach, you could also use another hearty green like kale. And that's gonna wilt down and cook beautifully as that comes down to the consistency that we're looking for. So we'll ladle some of this over some rice, and then I just like to spritz it with some fresh lime, and that just adds an extra oomph for me. Oh my God. That is unbelievably comforting and delicious. That butter broth, or whatever you want to call it, that the chickpeas are bathed in, has that perfect blend of fatty and savory and rich. I love it so much. On a bed of rice with a spritz of lemon, this is a happy evening. This is comfort food at its best, and even better, I made this in 25 minutes. What are we gonna do?
We're gonna make some frozen yogurt bark.
I'm so excited. So you have got 2 different yogurts here for us to try.
We have our coconut vanilla and then our unsweetened coconut. And I thought we can mix them both together.
Oh, mix them together, that's a good idea. Okay, great. So we're gonna mix it together in the pan?
Sure.
Swirly? Okay, great. You go, I'm the vanilla.
Yeah, so I'll do a swirl.
Oh, look at that.
Oh,
Look at that sound.
that's a sound.
You catching that, Mick?
One more time. Okay, your turn.
You got like a Zorro thing? I'm gonna zig that. You zagged, so I'm gonna zig.
Okay.
Uh-oh, kind of uniform that way. I'm gonna go, ooh. And then I'll start over here. We're gonna do 2?
Sure.
Why not, right? We're here. I mean, you put 2 out.
I did. Oh, that's nice.
Right?
Art.
Well, you know. Here we go. The sounds are my favorite part.
Wow.
We should probably spread this out, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you do that
I'll do
guy.
this one.
I didn't mean to genderize it. It could be a female yogurt pan.
You could.
It could be. The other thing you can do at home, if you have like a flavored yogurt with a color, is you do this, and then you can almost do like a swirl cake
Oh, yeah.
kind of design. Yeah, so for yogurt bark, my experience with it has been to, you kind of spread it all out on some kind of a pan with something that helps you lift. Here we're using plastic. And then it's just about having fun with what you put on top of it. And then we just have fun with it. And then you can do anything with this. Sometimes I'll even take jam and sprinkle it around on top. Kind of using up whatever you got. This is a great thing that I love, that I often will keep in my freezer, because it's just a great quick snack. Look at that.
Wow, so fancy.
Pretty. I mean, there's no wrong way to do this.
Yeah, it's different every bite.
These are pretty.
Oh, they look nice.
And there's never enough chocolate. So now we'll throw these in the freezer for a few minutes and see what happens. And we'll come back and we'll have some delicious yogurt bark.
Sounds good.
Okay. Here it goes. I think it's set. enough. I'd often leave it overnight. The real test is to seeing if it snaps, which
Yeah.
it might not snap, but it'll still be delicious. So as you can see, that's pretty good. So we just didn't let this set as long as I normally would, but it's still gonna be amazing and delicious. But that's okay. You got a piece?
There we go.
It's still gonna be good. Cheers.
Cheers. I liked it.
I go a lot. It still works, so it's a bit creamy. But it's nice when it's all the way firm because it snaps beautifully. Everyone loves chocolate chip cookies and everyone loves cake. Let's smash them together into a chocolate chip cookie cake. This is naturally gluten-free and super healthy because what we're gonna do in here for the fat content is white beans. Any bland white bean, like a chickpea or a white bean, would work for this. You'll never know it's in it. We're gonna put pretty much everything into our food processor. So we'll start with the beans. A cup of quick oats. You could also take rolled oats and just pulse them down a little bit. A cup of dates. These are nice and squishy and soft, but if they're hard, just soak them in hot water for a few minutes before. 3/4 of a cup of plant milk of your choice. And then we have 2 teaspoons of baking powder, 1/2 teaspoon of baking soda, and 3/4 a teaspoon of salt. Teaspoon of vanilla. And then here I'm using a ripe banana. You could also use a 1/2 cup of unsweetened applesauce. Let's just do we do the food processor dance, which doesn't help anything, but I like to do it. Yeah, if it's a little clumpy, that's okay. It can be a bit of a rustic cake here. I'm using a silicone baking sheet here, a round one. If you don't have silicone, you'll just want to lightly grease the edges. But what's great about this is that I don't need to put any extra oil inside of it or on top of it. It'll just bake inside there nicely. So you see, there's still some chunks in there with the dates, but that is okay. It's gonna be awesome. And now the most important part that makes it the chocolate chip. Dairy-free chocolate chips. I got about a 1/2 cup in here. At this point, if you wanted to add some nuts or anything else, this is a good time to do it. If you want to cut down on the sugar and you don't want to have chocolate chips in here, this is also amazing with just dried fruit. The trick with this is just to get a nice flat mixture across so it bakes evenly throughout. We're gonna bang the pan real quick. So that helps to flatten it all out and makes it nice and even. We're gonna bake this for 35 to 40 minutes at 350 degrees Fahrenheit. So I let this rest for about 15 minutes before taking it out of the silicone mold, and it is good to go. So slice this up in, I like to do about 8 slices, but I mean, I'm not gonna tell you how to cut your cake. You wanna eat this whole thing in one bite, go ahead. But this makes probably about 8 servings for, you know, a regular person who's cutting it up. Yeah, you get to see the chocolate chips inside there. It looks like a big slice of cookie, but who cares how it looks? Let's see how it tastes. It's creamy like a cake, but it's got that delicious soft cookie element to it. Not only is this a super healthy dessert, but it's packed with protein from those white beans. So you can eat this more or less guilt-free, even though there's chocolate chips in it. Yes. Yes, yes, yes. Do a couple sit-ups and smash one of these in your face. If you love spaghetti but are trying to avoid all of the carbs that come with pasta, this is the dish for you. We're gonna use spaghetti squash. This is particularly great in the summer months when this is in season. So we're gonna take 2 spaghetti squash and we're gonna cut them in half. Be very careful. Get a really sharp knife and you wanna cut it as evenly down the middle as you can. I'm strong, I swear. So now, you see all this gunk inside. You don't want that. So take your squash and you're gonna scrape out all that seeds and the guts that are inside of it. Just try to get all the really stringy bits too. You don't have to make it too pretty because after we bake this, we're gonna shred it all up anyway. So don't worry if it looks a bit funky on the inside. It's not gonna matter in the end. So as soon as you have emptied out all of those, what we're gonna do is just very, very lightly season the inside with just a little bit of salt. And this is just gonna help to bring out the juices and help it to cook a little bit more even and fast. And then we're gonna lay these out onto baking sheets. A baking dish works for this as well. And we're gonna put them cut side down. And we are just gonna pour a little bit of water inside the pan. So there's about 1/4 of an inch in the pan. And this is gonna help it steam inside the pan. We're gonna cook this inside the oven at 400 degrees for about 45 minutes. We're gonna flip those around halfway through. So while that squash is baking inside the oven, we're gonna make a quick Bolognese sauce. Get your pan up to the right temperature to cook. This is how you know it's at the right temperature. Take a little bit of broth or water and just splash the pan. And you're gonna see these little balls dance around and form, and they're gonna join into one massive mega ball. And that's how you know it's the right temperature. So we're gonna throw in a diced onion, 2 or 3 cloves of garlic, depending on how much you like your garlic. And because we wanna make this quick, I'm also gonna throw in the mushrooms. They release water for you, so you don't need oil here. We don't wanna leave that too long. We're just gonna let this really quickly cook. Now I'm gonna add in about 4 stalks of celery diced, 1 carrot diced, and then we're just gonna sweat that, but not for too long. And I'm gonna add just a little bit of vegetable broth, just to help. Oh, that's a happy sound. Oh, the smell's already coming. Yeah, we're just sweating these very delicately because they're gonna cook even more in a second when we boil these. I'm just gonna add a tablespoon of Italian seasoning. If you don't have Italian seasoning, you could use 1 teaspoon each of oregano, basil, garlic powder, or you could swap in some marjoram or thyme. It's pretty flexible with what you use in here. We're gonna use our cooking liquid, which is just 1 28-ounce can of diced tomatoes with the liquid. The liquid's the important part because that's what's gonna help our lentils cook. So we're gonna add in 1.5 cups of red lentils. These will turn down into a mush. So we're gonna plop those in and just stir them up and get this mixture to a boil. We're just gonna flatten down the mixture so that the lentils are at least even with the rest of it. And we're gonna bring it down to a simmer temperature and cover it for about 20 minutes. So once that squash is finished cooking, we're just gonna take a fork and we are just gonna grate it like this. And it just creates these wonderful strands. And this is why it's called spaghetti squash. Because you can see how those little strands look just like spaghetti. And you're just gonna go around and you're just gonna keep on doing this until you get as much as you can off the sides. And the nice thing is that the spaghetti squash has such a tough skin that you can really get in there and scrape with a fork and you're not gonna have much worry about breaking through it. Now all you have to do is spoon on that delicious Bolognese sauce. Put on a nice healthy portion of it. If you want to get extra fancy, you could sprinkle this with breadcrumbs or some kind of a plant-based cheese. But I'm just gonna have this as is. And here's my favorite part about this dish. It doesn't need a bowl. The squash is the bowl. It's so good. It doesn't have the same texture as spaghetti, but it's really close, and it does beautiful things when you mix it with that Bolognese. And what's great about this looks like a huge portion, but this is a fraction of the calories you would have in a pasta dish. Spaghetti was my favorite thing as a kid, and this makes 5-year-old Jeremy very happy. Faux meat and cheese products are really popular right now. They're also really expensive. So I'm gonna show you how you can make your own plant-based Parmesan cheese. You can use this as a topping on pizza, salads, sandwiches, anything you would use Parmesan cheese for. It literally only takes about 5 minutes to make this, and it stores in the fridge really well, and we only need a handful of ingredients. We're gonna start with 3/4 cup of cashews, 3 tablespoons of nutritional yeast. This seems like a really hippie product. Any bulk store or grocery store has this nowadays. This is what's gonna give it that really cheesy flavor. Then we're gonna add 3/4 teaspoon of both sea salt and garlic powder. And then I'm gonna use my dry blade on top of my little hand mixer here. You could also do this in a food processor if you don't have one of these little fellas. You don't want to go too long because it might just turn into some kind of a cashew butter, which is what you don't want. Look at that. That's Parmesan cheese right there. Oh my goodness. It's so good. So like I said, perfect topping for pasta, pizza, salad, anything you would normally put Parmesan cheese on. Whether it's a quick pick-me-up or a dessert, I can think of few things that are as decadent as raw cookie dough. We're gonna make one that's plant-based. It's also packed with protein because we're gonna use chickpeas. Everything goes into a food processor. So we're gonna put in about 1.5 cups of cooked chickpeas, 2 tablespoons of rolled oats, 1/2 cup of peanut butter. Now we're gonna add in 1/2 cup of maple syrup, teaspoon of vanilla, and just a little pinch of salt. Now we're just gonna puree this until it's nice and smooth. So we'll just scrape down the sides. What you don't want to see is giant chunks of chickpeas because you're trying to create the illusion that this is cookie dough. If you find it's too thick, you can always add more peanut butter, you can always add more maple syrup. Let's check the flavor out. Yeah, that's bang on. Oh my goodness. It's so good. Okay. So now all we have to do is put this back into a bowl of some kind. Try not to leave any of that delicious mixture behind. Now what we're gonna do is take our non-dairy chocolate chips. I got about 1/2 cup here. And we're just gonna fold them in ones before and just mix that all around until it's nice and even. And there you go, raw plant-based cookie dough. I usually like to let this sit in the fridge for a few minutes just because it tastes better cold, but it's pretty great as is. It's so good. There's a beautiful fatty quality from the peanut butter and the chickpeas, but this will make the 5-year-old inside of you ridiculously happy. And this is actually a really good and healthy post-workout snack as well. Sure, there's some maple syrup in there that adds some sweetness and sugar, but the chickpeas add a beautiful amount of protein that's great for a post-workout snack. So dessert, snack, post-workout treat, whatever you want, this is pretty healthy as far as raw cookie dough goes. When people think of tofu, I think they often picture squares or rectangles that go inside of like pad thai, and for me, that's just boring. So I'm gonna show you how you can use tofu in a way that adds more of the texture and the shape of something that you're missing, like a chicken. I pressed this tofu for about 1/2 hour. If you don't have a tofu press, that's fine. All you have to do is wrap it in a kitchen towel and then put some heavy books on top of it, and it'll do basically the same thing. Also, this recipe doesn't live or die by the fact that the tofu's been pressed, so if you can't do it, that's totally fine. So now what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna rip up this tofu just into little pieces, because this is what's gonna give it that texture that's a little bit more like chicken. And while I'm doing this, I'm gonna preheat my air fryer to 400 degrees Fahrenheit. And by the time this is ready, the air fryer will be up to temperature. So you don't have to be pretty here. You're just trying to get some pieces that are nice and texturized and have some bumps on them. So try not to make them too small because then they're gonna get really, really crispy, but that's okay too. There's no rhyme or reason for how you make the shapes. Just try to make them bite-sized and all roughly the same shape so that they cook evenly inside of the air fryer. If you don't have an air fryer, you could do this inside of a convection oven. It's just not gonna give the same texture on the outside, but it'll still be pretty great. Here I'm using extra firm tofu, but you could also get away with using firm. You don't want to use medium tofu here or silken because it'll just turn to mush. No good. You know what you can do with medium tofu? Throw it in the f***ing garbage because it's useless. So now that this is in the pieces we want, what we're gonna do is we're gonna toss it with a teaspoon of cornstarch and poultry seasoning. And then we're gonna toss that around with our hands until everything is coated. The cornstarch is what's gonna add to that crispy element, and the poultry seasoning is there for flavor. You can also do this without the poultry seasoning if you want, depending on what you're going for in terms of your flavor, but this adds that little chicken flavor we're looking for. So that is more or less nicely coated. So now all we're gonna do is pull out our air fryer basket, toss it inside, and then we're gonna let that cook for up to about 10 minutes maximum. We're gonna take this out and check it every 3 to 4 minutes to see if it's the right texture we want. Let's check it. Okay, this is getting close. There's a differing opinion in my household. My wife would take this out about now, and she would be wrong. It needs a little bit longer. You want it to almost be too dried out, because what's gonna happen is you're gonna put this inside of something else, and the liquid from that will rehydrate it a bit. But the longer you leave it, the more of that kind of chicken-like texture you're gonna get. So we're gonna put this in for at least another 2 or 3 minutes. Yes! That's the texture! It feels overcooked. That's exactly what I'm looking for. You can see when I rip it apart, oh, the steam. That there's little lines in it because we pressed it. And it looks like chicken when you rip it inside. It's not stringy the way chicken is, but it's pretty close in texture there. And because there's this little skin on it, you wouldn't want to eat it like this because it's a bit too dry. But the trick is, if you mix this into any kind of a dish that's got some kind of a liquid, it doesn't need much. It'll rehydrate for you. So just to give you an example here, I'm just gonna put a couple pieces in here and just throw in just a little bit of vegetable broth and just mix that around. So this is what you would do if you're adding it into like a stir fry or a pasta dish. Whatever the liquid is, it would just bring that moisture back in, but still keep that nice texture that you want. Yes. To be clear, what we're looking for here is texture. The flavor you're gonna add by the rest of your dish. But this is a very different way that you can do tofu that has a meatier texture than usual. Smash this in your face! When I was losing weight, I was obsessed with just trying to make things as healthy as possible. And this is a concept my son brought to me for making an oil-free pie. All we're gonna use is 2 base ingredients and then some flavorings. And those ingredients are a banana and some flour. The banana is gonna take the place of your fat, and the trick is to get one that's a little green still, and then put it in the fridge and let it get nice and cold. Just the way you would want butter to be a little bit cold when you're making pie crust. So we're just gonna break this up and put it inside of our food processor. And we're gonna mix that with 1 1/4 cups of whole wheat flour. I haven't tried this with a gluten-free 1-to-1, but it would probably work. And you could leave it at that if you wanted to, but I'm gonna add a few things just to up the flavor a little bit. Just a dash of salt, tablespoon of coconut sugar, and a teaspoon of cinnamon. Then we're just gonna blitz that until it's nicely combined. It's looking good. So depending on how large your banana is, you might not get the moisture you're looking for. If that's the case, just add some ice water, 1/2 tablespoon at a time. I used about 1.5 tablespoons, and I think it's gonna give me the right texture. So let's put a little bit of brown rice flour onto this sheet. What's great about brown rice flour is it doesn't absorb into the dough the way other flours do. So it won't stick in and just take away the moisture we have. This is gonna start forming into a ball already on its own. And we can just take this out and put it onto the mat. As you can see, this is already starting to bind together. It's much different than any dough you probably made, but it will work. And it's very forgiving. You can continue to shape it and just press pieces around. So don't worry if it breaks apart because you can just keep on pushing it down. So we're gonna roll this out to about 9 inches. It can be pretty thin. Oh, this is where you get your arm workout. Come on. And it's looking a bit funky, but it's okay because we're gonna continue to shape it as we go. So this is rolling out into about the right shape, and if you find little parts that need to be patched, like right here, just grab a little bit of dough from the end, pop it on top, and just roll it into it. This is all gonna be covered with filling, so you're not gonna see most of it anyway. So as you can see, this dough holds together pretty well. So it's not gonna be that hard to flip it into a pie plate. So I've already really lightly greased this pie pan. I just used a little bit of olive oil, but you could use coconut oil as well. So my trick is just to put it on top like that. Get your hand underneath, flip it, and hope for the best. All right, that's great. So now what you do is just very gently just start pushing it in so that it molds and forms to the edges of your pie sheet. So now I'm going to take a knife and I'm just going to go around the edge and just cut off the excess. So this pie crust is pretty much ready to go now. All I'm going to do is take a fork and just stab a couple holes in the bottom, and that will keep it from ballooning up when it cooks. And then if you want to make it a little prettier, you can just go around the edge and just place the fork on the edge and just press down lightly, and that's going to create nice grooves all the way around. You can use any fruit you want, fresh or frozen. I'm using 6 cups of mixed berries. We're going to put our pot full of fruit onto the stove and turn it on to medium-high heat. We're going to add in 1/3 cup of maple syrup, 1 tablespoon of lemon juice, a teaspoon of vanilla, a 1/4 teaspoon of tapioca starch. Cornstarch will also work. And we're just going to keep stirring this around until it cooks down. You're going to think it's way too liquidy, but when it starts to thicken up, it'll happen fast. So this is the perfect consistency I want for this pie filling. I'm just going to turn the heat off and let this sit while I get the rest of this ready. So you could just put the pie filling in here and it'll be delicious and lovely, but I'm going to add a streusel, which is essentially like a little crumble you put on top instead of doing like another layer of dough. So all I'm using here is 1/2 cup of whole wheat flour. You could use oat flour for this if you wanted to. I've got a 1/4 cup of coconut sugar, and then I've got a 1/4 cup of peanut butter. You could also use almond butter here as well. Let's mix that around. And all we're looking for here is it to kind of form like a really loose little crumbles is what we want, because we're going to sprinkle this all over the top. So we don't want it to form like a giant batter. Just get in there with your hands. Food wants to be touched. It wants to be loved. That's creating some nice crumbly goodness there. Might not even need all of this, but it's okay. It's better to have a little bit more and not need it than to need it and not have it. Need it? Get it? It's a bakery joke, huh? This crumble is great. Now we're gonna pour into that pie filling. As you can see, I probably could have put a little more filling in here. It's not going all the way up to the level of pie, but this might expand a little bit in the oven, and it's also gonna continue to thicken as it bakes. Now we're gonna take that crumble and we're just gonna let it dance all over top of that filling. And oh yeah, I made way too much, but that's okay. This is ready to go inside the oven. We're gonna bake this for only about 15 minutes at 350 degrees Fahrenheit. Otherwise, this crust will start to crack and break in weird ways. The taste is still amazing. It didn't set quite the way I wanted to, but flavor-wise, this is fantastic. You can use whatever fruit you want in a pie like this. Just make sure that you let it set. And this crust works either way. Make yourself some pie. Mmm, so good. You guys don't want some of this, right? I'm just gonna eat the whole thing. Our friends over at Henry's Tempeh gave us this custom-made Tempeh pizza crust. So we're gonna make Tempeh Pizza. I have no idea if this is gonna turn out. It's a bit of an experiment, but let's give it a whirl. So I'm just gonna slather on a little bit of tomato sauce because I haven't flavored this tempeh in any way. So I wanna make sure there's a nice thick layer that'll give us a lot of that tomato flavor. Maybe that's too much, we'll find out. So then I'm just gonna put some vegetables on this, whatever I would normally put on my pizza. So you can do whatever you want here. I'm just putting some sliced peppers, some broccoli, some mushrooms, and last but not least, some green olives. Pizza is not pizza without olives and mushrooms, as far as I'm concerned. You can fight me if you disagree. Come at you with my olives. If I had some plant-based cheese, I might sprinkle this on top, but because this is a bit of a last-minute experiment, I'm just gonna sprinkle it with some nutritional yeast. I'm not putting any protein source on here because the tempeh itself is so loaded with protein. So it's gonna do all the heavy lifting here since that's acting as our crust. So I'm just guessing how to bake this. I'm gonna try it at 375 for 15 to 20 minutes. I'm just gonna look for the edges to get nice and crispy. So I ended up actually baking this for closer to 30 minutes. And I'm curious how it's gonna turn out. I grabbed myself a knife and a fork because I'm not sure how this is gonna hold up. I realize not everyone has their own custom-made tempeh pizza crust, but you could just take a regular block of tempeh and cut it thinner. So cut it in half, and then just slather it with sauce and whatever toppings you want, and it would work the same. It's cutting nicely. Cuts like pizza. I'm curious how the integrity of this is gonna hold up as a slice. Woohoo! Look at that! A little slice of Tempeh Pizza. I like that a lot. Huh, that's so good. I was a little worried that the tempeh would be really overpowering here, but because it's a thinner slice, it blends in perfectly and it works as a really nice crust. It's a little flimsy, but it holds together beautifully. Henry's also has a basil tempeh, so if you have that, that would probably be even better to use as a base for some kind of like a square pizza crust. Tempeh Pizza, it works. So we are now just gonna eat vegetables.
We're gonna eat a lot of vegetables. This is like a sad vegetable recipe. So by sad, I mean the vegetables that get lost in the back of your fridge. You always forget about a couple carrots. Maybe you picked up a squash and you let it sit on your counter for a month. And you're kind of like, what do I do with it? Roast them. So we took carrots and there's a butternut squash. We roasted it for about 20 minutes, 350 degrees. You can't really go wrong. Roasting it, again, just brings out that flavor. And then what we're gonna add, because I really like pairing colors with colors in the plant world, especially orange, because we are using turmeric root. Turmeric root is the queen of anti-inflammatory in the natural world. It has an active compound called curcumin, which really supports reducing inflammation in your body. And so the beautiful thing is that when you juice fresh turmeric, this is what it looks like. And it's very, very potent. But when you mix it with root vegetables, I find that it kind of hides the flavor because it is really potent. Like turmeric is a really intense flavor. The intense flavors normally mean that it's very good for you. So we're going to use the carrot and the butternut squash to kind of hide the turmeric. And then as a base, we're going to use hemp seeds.
Nice, and you got some ginger there too.
Yes, ginger, we're gonna use a little bit as well. So again, ginger is an extremely good digestive aid, and they're just awesome roots. They're really good for you, add so much flavor, and these are two that are actually very good bases for like a curry. So this is gonna have like a little bit of like a curry-esque flavor.
Okay.
But the hemp seeds actually add like a really nice nuttiness to it without it using nuts. So it is nut-free.
Nice.
And going back to the lovely world of like one blender wonders, you put everything into a blender, you blend it, and then you look at it and you see if it needs water or oil, depending on what type of texture you want. So we are going to grab our blender. We're going to put, we start off with the root vegetables, and then we are going to add in a couple other ingredients. So grab the blender jug, sorry.
Okay.
Thank you. So you can add half the squash and half the carrots. Use your hands. I always say hands are your best tools in a kitchen. I know some people don't like using their hands.
Oh, you guys, if you don't touch the food, where does the love come from?
That's exactly it. Your hands tell you everything. It's the quickest way to know if something is done. Obviously, don't burn yourself, but these have been cooled for a while. We're going to add about a cup of hemp seeds.
Okay.
There you go. And these are hulled hemp seeds, which just, they have a bit higher protein. I find that the taste and the texture is much smoother, so you can just add that right in. So we're now going to add about half of this bottle, which is about 12 pieces of turmeric.
12? Is that enough? You got enough in there?
I like to make things potent. When you eat your food, it should do good things for you. And it also goes, nice catch, it goes really well with the flavor of the carrot and squash. So yeah, so add about half of the bottle in there, please. Now it is time to flavor it. So again, this is very like personal preference. I can eat like 10 cloves of raw garlic a day. Love it. Some people don't like it. So this is just good quality garlic powder. I'll let you. Let's start with 2 teaspoons and then we'll adjust. You can always add more. You cannot take out anything when you make a dip. So I always tell people when you're making it, add less than you think so that you don't overpower it. This is dry basil, 1 teaspoon will work. Dry basil is a much different flavor than fresh basil. I really like it, again, with like root vegetables. And turmeric, this is oregano, 1 teaspoon as well. Beautiful. And then we're gonna go 2 teaspoons of onion powder. Onion powder, it seems redundant, it adds so much flavor. Now that we have all of our dry ingredients, other than the turmeric, we're gonna start by adding just about 2 ounces of water, just to see what type of texture we get, and then we're gonna keep adding more. Same thing with the seasoning. You cannot take out moisture, you can only add moisture in. We have our filtered water. I'm just gonna eyeball it. I'm gonna go a little bit more. There you go. So now you can put the lid on. We're going to blend it. So the other thing with dips, it's one of the few things I add salt at the very end too.
Ah.
Yeah.
That makes sense. Because it might not need it.
Might not need it, and it's so easy to oversalt things. Pate?
That's what looks like a whisk.
What's that pate? I've never seen that.
Oh,
So,
yeah.
that noise, that is telling you that your blender is working too hard. So we're gonna stop it. There we go. So that gives you like a good idea of, okay, it's very thick.
It's very thick.
So now I'm gonna add a little bit of oil.
Like a little blob? You have to tell me. Oop.
Oh, a little bit more. A little bit more. A little bit more.
Yeah?
Yeah. There we go. And then we're gonna add the water again. One more. Let's try there.
So this is where we want it to be.
Yes, so we finally have the texture that we're really happy with. Now we're adding one of my favorite ingredients of life. Sounds dramatic, but it is that important. Nutritional yeast, like we were talking about it, for vegans or plant-based world, it is the ingredient that gives something a cheese-like flavor. But the cool thing about nutritional yeast is that it actually has the highest amount of B12 out of any ingredient. So it's like sprinkling on a vitamin that makes something taste like cheese that's dairy-free.
Who doesn't like cheese and vitamins?
And vitamins that taste like cheese.
Yeah.
It's wonderful.
If you could make a cheese tablet, everyone would eat that. And that's right here. This is your cheese tablet.
I think cheese tablets are like cheddar, blocks of cheddar.
That's fair.
But this is healthier. So we're gonna add just like two tablespoons. I do find it is very potent.
Yeah.
And I don't want this to be like a cheese dip. It just adds a nice little amount of flavor. And then we are gonna add about 2 teaspoons of salt. And just another splash of water, because that's the other thing with hemp seeds specifically. The longer you allow them to sit, they'll actually start to absorb more liquid.
So you gotta work fast.
You gotta work fast. You are good to go.
Smoothie setting?
Smoothie, yes, thank you.
All right, so that's blended.
Best part,
You gotta taste it.
you gotta taste it. You gotta check for salt, for pepper, for balance, for texture.
It's so creamy and smooth, and then nothing is overpowering anything else. They're all just kind of dancing together.
See, that's crazy. We added so much turmeric.
You don't taste the turmeric.
You don't taste it.
Yeah, like when turmeric's in something a lot, you can tell. That's so delicious. And you can tell like the roasted vegetables are in there too.
Mm-hmm.
There's that earthiness to it, but it's rich, but it doesn't feel heavy. That's a delicious, delicious seed dip.
It's a people pleaser, nut-free, but also even if you don't eat plant-based or vegan, it's just a good dip.
So you'd want that on crackers?
Crackers, veggies.
Sandwich, you can spread that in a sandwich?
Yeah,
So good.
be really good in a sandwich.
Thanks for checking out our third and final compilation of our whole food, plant-based, vegan, beginner recipe type things. If you missed one of the previous videos, let me know, and I'll put the link down below. You know what? I'm gonna put the link down below anyway. It's already in the description. Look how fast that was. If you're not subscribed to the channel, why not? You got to the end of this very long, epic video. You should do so for more content like this. Speaking of which, YouTube wants you to watch this one next. I mean, you've already put an hour into watching this video. What's another whatever the length of this video is? You know what I'm saying?